Chapter 14, The Web Tightens. As the week wore on, the tension in the castle grew palpable. Elowyn had barely finished one set of trials when another challenge was placed before her: political chaos. The nobles were in an uproar over her meeting with Echini Tempus, the saintess, without informing them first. Whispers spread through the corridors like wildfire. Was the princess being manipulated by a foreign force? What did Echini truly want with the princess? Lord Castian Vale had wasted no time exploiting the situation, fanning the flames of doubt. "She cannot be trusted to make decisions without oversight," he declared in a closed meeting, his voice cutting through the heated argument. "She's surrounded by foreign influences and subversive advisors. Her judgment is clearly compromised." His words were sharp, and they stung deeper than she cared to admit. Even though the truth was that the saintess had not led her astray, the impression in the court was now something Elowyn couldn't easily erase. The royal council had moved swiftly. It was no longer safe for Elowyn to roam the halls, not even to her beloved archives. As the debates turned to whispered conspiracies, the princess's freedom shrank bit by bit. She was ordered into house protection, locked away from prying eyes for her safety, and in the guise of protection, to keep her from causing more trouble. Her movement was now restricted. The castle gates were closed to her, and no longer could she simply wander freely to meet with her allies. Celine remained at her side, her loyalty unwavering, but for the others, the world outside the castle had become a maze of permissions and restrictions. Even her cousin, the prince, was forced to seek permission to see her. The gates of the castle, once open to family, now seemed to be closely guarded. Elowyn's heart ached. What had started as a need for protection had turned into something else entirely. A prison. No one would meet her without official approval. The situation felt stifling. Her allies had become strangers in their own right, and her hands were bound by forces beyond her control.
Seeking a veto!
A storm of voices and threats in her mind as she paced the royal gardens, the last semblance of freedom before the shackles were fully put in place. She couldn't bear it. She couldn't let them lock her away like this, not when the kingdom's future hung in the balance. "We need to find a way out of this," she murmured to Celine, who followed behind her silently, eyes sharp, watching every step. "I'm working on it, Princess." Celine said, though her words were measured, thoughtful. But Elowyn's frustration was at a boiling point. "It's not enough. We can't be shut in here forever." Her voice, usually so composed, broke under the weight of it all. "I know," Celine replied. "The council can't continue to hold you like this." Elowyn's eyes narrowed. She needed power, influence. The time to act was growing short. "I'll go to Lord Vale. If I can't sway the court through force, I'll appeal to their pride." But before she could finish her thoughts, another troubling news reached her. Whispers of the king's illness. The rumours were unsettling, even more so when they proved true. King Alistair's father, was on his deathbed. The court had been whispering of it for days, but it was now official. He was expected to pass within the week. Alistair, always so stoic, had been keeping his distance, his face clouded by the weight of his father's impending death. Elowyn's thoughts turned to him, to the cousin she had once looked to for stability in this chaos. But as the dark days stretched on, it became clear that Elowyn's once strong connection to him was now complicated by his own duties, as well as his father's legacy. Her position in the kingdom, already tenuous, was about to become more fragile than ever. And she would have to decide whether to reach out to him, despite their differences, or whether the weight of her own crown would force her to walk alone. The shadow of political instability loomed large over the kingdom. The royal bloodline was about to change. Elowyn's cousin would likely ascend the throne. If she couldn't solidify her position within the court now, she would have no claim to the throne when it was time. The court was not a place for the weak, and right now Elowyn felt every ounce of that truth pulling her into the dark.
A kingdom in flux.
But Elowyn had no time to wallow in despair. She gathered her thoughts, and though the weight of responsibility was heavier than ever, The fire in her chest burned brighter. The kingdom needed her. It was undeniable. It was not just about her family's lineage or bloodlines anymore. It was about the future of the people. And no matter how suffocating it felt, Elowen would not back down. Not now, not ever. As she glanced toward the sky, she whispered softly, "The kingdom must stay whole, the crown must stay intact." Chapter 14 continued. The dark clouds gather. The storm outside the castle grew more oppressive as the days went on. The sky, once clear and brilliant, had now turned a deep, threatening grey. Dark clouds loomed overhead, as if the heavens themselves reflected the turmoil within the walls of the royal court. Elowen could feel the weight of the storm pressing down on her, matching the pressure building in her chest. Lord Castian Vale was no longer just a political nuisance. He had become a true threat, his machinations stretching far beyond what anyone had initially realised. His cold demeanour, sharp tongue, and constant meddling had now taken a more sinister turn. His proposals for a union between Elowen and Alastair were no longer subtle hints but firm demands, as if he sought to tie the fates of the royal family through force. For weeks, Lord Vale had been pushing for marriage between her and Alastair, seeing it as the only way to unite the kingdoms and secure peace in the realm. But Elowen saw through his supposed noble cause. She wasn't blind to the underlying power play. A union between her and Alastair would strengthen his hold on both the kingdom and the crown, consolidating his influence over the realm in ways that no one could afford to ignore. Elowen's eyes narrowed as she stood at the window of her room, watching the clouds darken and swirl. The whispers of Lord Vale's true intentions were louder than ever. It wasn't just about securing a political alliance, it was about control. And the realization that Elowen was being manipulated all along made her stomach churn. Her mind flitted back to the dream she'd had, the cryptic warning that had come to her in the dead of night, urging her to remain wary of those around her. Lord Castian Vale had been an influential figure, but now, as she pieced everything together, his zest in uniting the families felt much too orchestrated, too convenient. The mastermind revealed? The more Elowen thought about it, the more her gut twisted. The threads were all there: Alastair's marriage, the pressure on the royal bloodline, and Vale's constant whispers about the future of the kingdom. Was it possible that Lord Vale was the puppet master behind her current turmoil? His influence was reaching far beyond what a mere noble should wield, and there were too many unsettling coincidences to ignore. Could it be that he was the one pulling the strings behind the scenes, manipulating events to ensure his dominance? As Elowen turned away from the window, her fingers traced the books that lay open on her desk, ancient texts and scriptures she had pored over in recent days, seeking answers to the growing darkness surrounding her. The curse still lingered in the shadows, but it was Lord Vale's schemes that were beginning to take centre stage. "He's not just a political player," Elowen whispered to herself. "He's trying to destroy everything." But the truth of the matter was more complicated. Could she truly expose Lord Vale as the mastermind behind the recent events, or was he only a part of a greater conspiracy? Had someone close to her, someone she had trusted, been working in the shadows all along? The princess's dilemma. The more Elowen thought about her dreams and the messages she had received, the more she began to question the nature of her power. Her connection to the gods was not something to be taken lightly. If Lord Vale was indeed in league with darker forces, he had undoubtedly seen the potential of the bloodline that ran through her veins. He might even see her as a tool, someone he could use to ascend to greater heights, or worse, as a vessel for the evil god's power. Elowen clenched her fists, her thoughts racing. The danger was more real than ever, and the weight of it all threatened to crush her. But there was no turning back now. She couldn't afford to doubt herself. The future was now hers to shape, but how could she cut through the lies and manipulations surrounding her? She knew she needed to act swiftly, but her options were growing limited with each passing hour, and the palace was becoming more of a prison by the day. She needed to unmask the mastermind, and if that meant confronting Lord Vale directly, then she would. But Elowyn also knew there was something far more sinister at play. As much as Lord Vale seemed like the puppet master, the true threat might still lie in the shadows, waiting to reveal itself. The council's influence was not the only problem she faced. There were those who sought to use her for their own agendas, and now that the king's health was declining rapidly, the power struggles within the royal family were escalating. If her cousin ascended to the throne, Elowyn was certain she would face an even greater battle for control over her future.
A world on the edge. The tension in the air was
Thick and suffocating. Elowyn knew time was running out. She had to prepare for what was to come and expose the truth of her bloodline before it was too late. The dark clouds gathering in the sky weren't just a sign of the kingdom's uncertain future. They were a warning. The storm was coming, and Elowyn could no longer ignore the rising tide of darkness. With a deep breath, she stood tall, her heart filled with determination. There was only one thing left to do now. She would find the mastermind, and she would stop them, no matter the cost.